since I'm getting remarried, you'll need to find a new place to live. The responsibility for the $15,000 loan will now be on my new partner," he said, a sardonic edge to his tone. After years of diligently working to pay off that loan, I was taken aback by his audacity to shift the burden to his next wife. "Then I guess the $6,000 monthly payments will now fall on your shoulders," I shot back, emphasizing how much of the financial strain I had been shouldering all alone. Without missing a beat, I resumed working on the divorce papers. From this moment on, whatever challenges lay ahead, even if the road is rocky, it's no longer my concern. I'm Sarah, a 43-year-old housewife with a part-time job. My soon-to-be ex-husband, Peter, is 4 years older, and we've spent the last decade together. We first met at a company where we both worked. Back then, my focus was solely on my career. Marriage and romance weren't on my radar. However, after turning 32, a coworker encouraged me to switch jobs, which led me down a different path. Shortly after, Peter, a senior colleague from my previous workplace, confessed his feelings for me. From the very beginning, our relationship was geared toward marriage. Despite my initial reservations, we tied the knot 3 years later. Largely influenced by outside pressures, Peter's parents embraced me wholeheartedly, treating me like a daughter, which helped ease my transition into married life. A year into our marriage, we built a house that symbolized our shared dreams and commitment, albeit with a hefty loan and a long repayment plan. For the first few years, we operated as a typical working couple, supporting each other's ambitions and managing our finances together. However, 4 years into our marriage, just as we were beginning to entertain thoughts of starting a family, Peter dropped a bombshell. He intended to quit his job to pursue his dream of entrepreneurship. He had secretly been laying the groundwork, building connections, and saving money, aiming to launch his business before turning 41. I learned about his resignation only after it had happened. This lack of communication stung, especially since Peter assumed my income would suffice to support us during this uncertain transition. Soon after he launched his business, we were hit with a family crisis. My father-in-law became seriously ill and required extensive medical care. It became clear he wouldn't be able to return to his normal life, necessitating significant renovations to his home to accommodate his new health needs. Although my in-laws insisted they could handle the costs, Peter decided we would cover all the necessary modifications. I wanted to do everything I could for my family, but shouldering all these expenses felt overwhelming. Our household expenses skyrocketed, leaving me struggling to cope with the financial strain. With Peter's business struggling to stay afloat due to constant contract cancellations and a lack of new opportunities, his income had nearly vanished. I found myself bearing the full weight of our living expenses and the burdensome loan payments alone. Despite our precarious financial situation, Peter remained detached, brushing off my concerns as if they were someone else's problem. Our credit card debt grew steadily, worsened by Peter's frequent nights out, which he justified as essential for networking and client development. Facing a future drowning in debt, I proposed drastic solutions: either sell the house or shut down the failing business. But Peter, ever the optimist, dismissed the idea that we were on the brink of financial collapse. He insisted we just needed to push through, blind to the reality that we were surviving solely because of my steady income. He seemed oblivious to the seriousness of our situation, and any attempt to discuss it felt increasingly pointless, especially since the bills were still getting paid. Our conversations dwindled to almost nothing, and I was well aware that Peter was seeing other women, using work as a convenient cover. By then, though, my feelings toward him had turned to indifference. One evening, after I returned from work, Peter broke the silence that had long hung between us. With a smirk, he tossed a piece of paper onto the table and said, "I've decided to divorce you. Sign here." I took a deep breath, surprisingly calm as I absorbed his words and the sight of the divorce papers. It was a relief in a way, I had been considering asking for a divorce myself, but Peter had beaten me to it. "Can we take a moment? I just got home. Let's sit down in the living room and discuss this," I suggested. "You wanted to talk, and now you're stalling?" he shot back, his irritation obvious. "I don't have time for useless conversations. Just sign the papers." I took my time walking to the living room, feeling his impatience simmering. It frustrated me how this was all happening on his terms, so I decided to take control in the small way I could by stretching out this moment just a little longer. The decision was already made. After all, divorce was inevitable, and the home we had so carefully built together was now nothing more than a fading memory. I wanted to savor the last few moments of this chapter, but at my own pace. Once seated on the sofa, I picked up the divorce papers again. They felt light in my hands, as insubstantial as the marriage certificate we had signed 12 years ago, much like the way I now felt about our relationship. "How long are you going to sit there staring at them?" Peter snapped, growing more annoyed by the second. "I want to discuss what happens after the divorce. What are your plans? You seem to be reconsidering things," I said, my voice steady. "While I'm fully committed to moving forward with the divorce, I think it's important we talk this through. I've heard you're planning to remarry. Is there someone new? She must be young and successful, right? Not like me, an older woman who didn't even give you children. Are you planning to rely on her financial support next?" "You really think so little of me?" he scoffed. "For your information, I've always managed our finances just fine. You never had to worry about the bills. Despite your high and mighty attitude, I'll be much better off without you. Honestly, this divorce is a relief." "I'll chalk up your harsh words to frustration," I replied, calmly meeting his gaze. "You feel cornered and defeated. But soon, none of this will matter. I won't have to see you anymore. Make sure you're out by the end of the week," Peter said coldly. "Actually, I'm leaving today. I can't stand hearing your voice any longer," I responded calmly. "By the way, does your new partner know about the debts you're carrying? I assume she's agreed to help with the expenses and chip in $1,000 a month for your living arrangements. It should be easy for her, unlike how it was for me. Once I sign the divorce papers, I'm gone. My things are already packed, and I'll leave the furniture as part of our asset division. Feel free to get rid of it if it's useless to you. Just go already," he muttered. "And I sincerely hope your new girlfriend enjoys managing the $6,000 monthly loan payment," I added, handing him a note. "I've left all the loan details clearly outlined for her." With that, I got into my car and drove away from what used to be our home, now just a memory. My destination was clear, City Hall, where I would officially submit the divorce papers. As I drove, a wave of relief washed over me, lifting a weight I had carried far too long. In hindsight, I realized I should have done this sooner. I had spent too much time worrying about how Peter would handle the loan payments when, in reality, it was no longer my problem. A week after the divorce, I woke one morning to my phone ringing incessantly. It was Peter. While I had expected him to reach out eventually, I couldn't help but feel irritated by the constant interruptions. Finally, I picked up. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my frustration in check. "I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important," Peter said defensively. "But is it true what I've heard about the $6,000? I sighed, exasperated. "Why would I lie about that? Are you seriously expecting me to pay off your debts now?" Maybe I should have spelled everything out more clearly in the note instead of assuming you'd actually read it. "Everything you need to know is in there," I explained. "I thought you'd understand if you just took the time." "I'm calling because I still don't get it," he said, his frustration growing, even after reading it. I paused for a moment, gathering my patience before breaking it down. "Fine. Here it is. Besides the mortgage on the house, There are other expenses you're conveniently ignoring. There's the cost of renovating your parents' home, the loan for your father's medical bills, the business loan for that doomed venture of yours, and the credit card debt, all in your name. If it were just the mortgage, maybe I could have handled it, I continued. But it's much more than that, and now that we're divorced, it's no longer my responsibility. I told you when I left that the total monthly payment is $6,000. Did you think this was all a joke? I added. You spent money without a second thought, and now it's catching up to you. Those monthly payments are your reality now. You and your new girlfriend can deal with them. Isn't that what you wanted when you divorced me? Peter hesitated before replying. Actually, she broke up with me, said $6,000 a month was more than she could handle. I figured as much, I replied, unsurprised. It's understandable. Even someone with a high income would hesitate to take on $6,000 a month for debts they didn't create. No one wants to end up paying 22 times the value of a house over the years. Were you earning that much after switching jobs? Yes, my salary increased fivefold, Peter admitted, but all that extra income just goes straight to repayments. I had no idea you were making that much, I said, genuinely surprised. If I'd known, I might not have suggested the divorce. It's not that you didn't know, he countered. You just weren't interested. After I changed jobs, you never asked about my work or how much I was making. You should have told me yourself, I shot back. You never brought up your income either. Even when we worked together, you hardly communicated. And once you became independent and your income tanked, you still spent like money grew on trees. I didn't see the point, he said, his frustration evident. Then his tone softened. Let's start over. Come back to me. I refuse, I said firmly. I've finally found my freedom. But what about those payments? $6,000 a month is impossible to manage. Why not sell the house and use your income to pay off the remaining debts? He suggested, desperation creeping into his voice. If you adjust the repayment plan, you might be able to handle it. Why would I? I replied, steady and unwavering. I have no involvement with you anymore. I'm not interested in a stranger's debts. You're so cold, he said, sounding hurt. Don't you have any empathy? I might seem cold, but I've been making those payments for over 7 years, I explained. Some of it was out of love for you, but mostly it was out of obligation to your parents. If you had wanted to fix things, maybe we could have worked through it, but you're the one who chose divorce. I paused, taking a deep breath. Technically, I could sell the house, split the assets, and even claim alimony for adultery if I wanted to. But instead, I chose to prioritize my well-being. I was done with someone who pretended to be wealthy while recklessly spending. I was exhausted from covering for your financial mess. My life is my own now, and I won't be dragged back into your debts. With that, I ended the call. After our conversation, Peter stopped interfering in my life. The sense of relief I felt when everything was finally settled was overwhelming. I later found out that he had to quit his job and give up the house, forcing him to create a new repayment plan for his loans. Returning to his old job must have been humiliating, especially with everyone watching. Despite his efforts, the loan payments remained a heavy burden. I also learned that his parents had to sell their house and move into a retirement home. It saddened me to think that they wouldn't have faced such hardship if we hadn't divorced. In an effort to help them through this transition, I assisted with their move and contributed financially to cover their entry fees. It was my way of repaying the kindness they had shown me over the years. I truly hope they can now enjoy a peaceful life, free from the weight of those crushing $6,000 payments. As for me, I've embraced a frugal lifestyle and am living comfortably. My savings are growing steadily, and I've started looking into investments to secure my financial future. Since my divorce, I've moved forward with a new partner, and every day feels fulfilling, both professionally and personally. I've finally found the happiness that was missing for so long.